2021 DevOps predictions. Like, what are the trends that probably already started but are really gonna take hold in 2021?
I wonder if beyond Kube is going to get more traction, or if Kubernetes is going to stabilize enough to satisfy people who are looking at it.
I have only heard really rough chatter on the periphery on that. Can you tell me more about Beyond Kube?
Well, over the past, I say 2 years or so, there's been a lot more posts saying like, "Oh, we regret moving on to Kubernetes." Like they got sold it, right? And now people are realizing the complexity that Kubernetes added was like, yeah, okay, we have this application. Now we added Kubernetes on it, and now we have like 10 problems, right, instead of the old ones. This, I can see where that's reality for many, right? I mean, Kubernetes can do its thing. Kubernetes can be have value at a certain scale or at a certain problem, right? It can solve any problem, basically, if the scale is large enough. There's a lot of things being talked about it now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's inevitable that, well, so what we have are like, abstractions on abstractions on abstractions, but what's so valuable about those abstractions, just like in mathematics and doing proofs, is they help you simplify the problem into solving other things, and then you can rethink how to do it to get to the answer. So I feel like Kubernetes has been that, the tool for us in DevOps.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of tool that helps you with these abstractions. Like, when Kubernetes came out, people say one of the things that was said, like, oh, secret is built in, right? But saying that is like, so it's a fraud in a way, because there's so many layers to it. How do you get the actual file mounted into the volume, which references the secret, which references the operator, which pulls it from the storage of the secret? You know what I mean? And who puts it in there in the first place, right?
How does it even get there to begin with?
There's going to be
the genesis
story of what tool. I don't know what tool is going to be the magic tool that does that sort of finally gives you this abstraction. It's got to be something soon. I'm
waiting for that silver bullet. And then there's exciting development, right, with HashiCorp coming out with Waypoint, their PaaS solution. Their abstract PaaS, like that. Yes, it works with Kubernetes. Yes, it works with Nomad. Yes, it works with ECS. Yes, it works with all these other things. Is that the Beyond Kube extract? Does that qualify as a Beyond Kube abstraction?
I'm guessing at least for the developer workflow, and maybe also for production. That's the part that's always tricky, right? Because production is always has some sort of caveat, right, which makes it not work.
It does, and they're necessarily different because you're optimizing, right, for different experiences. Like in production, you're optimizing for stability, reliability, scalability, and for developer, you're developing for like real-time reloading and ease of and speed for reloading.
Yeah.
Have you looked at Waypoint as part of this evaluation, since you were also looking into Tilt?
Yeah, that's the first one I tried, but I threw it out pretty early. But maybe not for a good reason. It's just it had a bit of boilerplate that I needed to do with the Waypoint server and stuff like that, so I just skipped it for now. But I'll definitely revisit it. One thing though, the biggest thing, and this is part of the complaints at our place, is like, the developers feel too far from Kubernetes, right? Because we don't really have developer Kubernetes. We have a staging Kubernetes, many of them, and then production Kubernetes. But they don't really have anything. So they develop on their local host without Kubernetes. So Tilt, for me, is like, wow, this really made me feel intimate with Kubernetes even, right? The way I use it.
But but in a different way. Like you're building some Kubernetes operational competency at some level, but it's totally different than how you're using Kubernetes in those staging and production environments, no?
Yeah, but first of all, my applications doesn't even have YAML that's usable, right? Until I built it now. So that's the first step, right? Creating the YAML for the applications and then putting that YAML. Obviously, it's going to be a JSONet template, though, but what they will be working with when they look in the cluster is going to be the resulting YAML. And when they diff, it's going to be the resulting YAML. So that's going to help them a lot. And I'm going to put that YAML, instead of it's being in a production deployment repo, I'm going to take that upstream and put it in the application itself.
Yeah.
possibly for Argo to pick up. And I'm thinking also to have a Terraform module in each of those application repos so that each application has the basics it needs to be able to be customized via variables in production also.
Yeah. So, okay, so we got one prediction there around the beyond. Well, what happens after Kubernetes? Like, this has been great.
I wanna
How do we go on?
I wanna jump in here. Like,
Yeah.
Kubernetes solved a big problem. It didn't solve the infra bullshit and all that. It gave a standard API across clouds and on-prem. And that means that people can now build tools that have way bigger market reach. Like building Tilt and having Tilt run only on AWS is a significantly lower market than AWS, GCP, Azure, and on-prem with Kubernetes. Having that standard API is a big deal. Since Kubernetes started and a bunch of companies migrated wisely or unwisely to it, the landscape around it also matured. Like 2 years ago, Fargate was launched 2 or 3 years ago. I don't exactly remember. But that's a thing. Fargate matured a lot. It's very easy to run containers now. AWS with all their awesome engineers are handling all the production issues for you, and you don't have to stress about it. We did not have that in the time of, I know, Cube 1.4 when I started using it.
Yeah. The one thing that I struggle with ECS is like this separation between platform and infrastructure, and ECS kind of muddles the two to me. Where you're still using the same tools to just, basically the complexity of deploying a new task in ECS is the complexity of deploying new infrastructure versus in Kubernetes is just, here, take it, here's my app, here's my YAML, deploy it.
Yeah, and I think that could possibly also mature next year. But the thing about ECS is that the people who use ECS are quiet, right? Because they're very successful, so they don't need to blog about it. That's my theory, at least. And that's also based on what I've seen at reInvent, for example. The kind of companies and the kind of scale that's presented there when they actually talk about going all in on AWS using ECS. I think ECS ECS problems could be solved if someone sat down and wrote a JSON-X abstraction for it, actually, and possibly a new CLI that like really fixes it. Although they already did that. They already did
no
that
more
with one of the
ECS
CLIs.
CLI. No more ECS CLIs. There are way too many. It's getting ridiculous.
I don't know what their own is called. I tested that one as well. It was really easy. That was the best thing I've ran so far. But again, unusable in production.
All right. Any other predictions? That was really good, by the way. I like that one. Any other predictions in this landscape and what we do? Maybe any consolidations?
So I think machine learning and AI is going to be on the slope of enlightenment, I guess. I don't think anyone's actually going to get there, but the DevOps pipelines, I think, eventually will be more driven by machine learning than it is now.
Yeah, I keep waiting to see a little bit more of that come into, what's the word I'm looking for? Like commoditized DevOps stuff that we do. Google's obviously doing some pretty amazing stuff around that and shutting down data centers predictably and optimizing costs. But how can we bring this to everyone else beyond spot instances?
Right. And you mentioned before, but value streams and prog streams, I think are going to be very critical for companies to understand what that actually means instead of the fake agile that a lot of enterprise customers do right now.
Yeah.
So it all kind of comes together. I think companies are going to try next year. I think a lot of them are going to fail at it.
Yeah. Any predictions on Lambdas or serverless?
I'm seeing an adoption internally at our place, even here. But again, it's one of those things that's not talked about too much.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know, just anecdotally, this is not quantitative. This is just, from my conversations, I hear it less a little bit less these days, and a reversal actually from serverless back to like just simple containers and deployments. But I think that that says more about the company and the team than maybe the technology.
I think you're right about that too. I think more and more people are realizing the correct use for the tools. And I think more and more people who went on board on Kubernetes also realize that, wow, okay, in order to run Kubernetes, there's actually an infrastructure layer below this kind of platform, right?
Yeah.
That's the realization that's coming too.
That strikes a chord with me on one thing that has been a realization for us in our consulting is that I would say 2019 definitely, and part of 2020 we were gung-ho about like, dude, we have Kubernetes, we have this platform, let's maximize the use of it, let's find every open source tool that we can deploy and deploy it there, let's stop paying for SaaS. And we did that, and now it's like, yeah, no, that was a mistake. We have way too much infrastructure, surface area under management. This thing's deprecated, that thing's deprecated. This has been refactored and totally redone. And now I'm like, wait, how can we deploy as little as possible and leverage more managed services for all that stuff that we would have done? Case in point, Prometheus, Grafana, Thanos, Sentry.
Yeah. That's very interesting. For
complement what you're saying with the managed services, I do see that the DevOps community in general has created a streamlined approach where we're seeing the invisible hand theory play out. I mean, you have companies that are trying to utilize save costs and operations, but in turn, that's creating more technology or greater technology. So.
Yeah. And then in turn creating more opportunities, and yeah, that goes full circle. What, Vlad, you were going to say something, or someone else?
Yeah, it's interesting because for me, 2019 was the year of observability. A lot of things happened around that, and getting information closer to the developers. GitHub Actions was a big thing in that. Like, you can now live in GitHub UI. You have your code there, you have your deploys there, you have your reports from whatever static tool you're using to check your code and things like that. And that has been a big deal for me. And it's very funny, and it depends where you, like what network you're in, kind of like what ecosystem you live in.
Yeah.
Because like for me, I'm seeing a lot of Lambda, very much of experimentation going with testing in production and feature flagging. I'm seeing a huge move from disposable environments to feature flagging and testing in production because people realize how expensive disposable environments are.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends where with what playground people are in.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a tsunami of emerging technologies. So there's equivalent threats. So with the new technology, there's going to be an equivalent threat or complex operational readiness. So anytime you introduce a new technology or new paradigm shift, there's going to be that equivalent threat. You have Fortune 500 companies that are getting hacked today. We have 50, U.S. agencies, the best of the business, that are correct. That they're our livelihood. So they're getting hacked. So obviously, we need to create a center of excellence around these emerging technologies. Something, it can go from 1 to 100 in 2 seconds. Great, but how do you protect what that payload looks like?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's across the board. So I mean, when it comes down to DevOps, even the companies that are utilizing it as a playground, they're still implementing best practices somewhere, because you have someone that's going to fork that code and begin to implement some type of solution, whether it's solving, contact tracing, or essentially solving even a more challenging problem, or what have you. So.
Yeah, you had a couple good points in there. I think is that one thing is for sure is that this year we're going to see 24 more new technologies emerge as the way to do it, and that's just going to increase complexity. And yet we keep talking about best practices and like, what does it mean anymore? Like, who can define this stuff when it moves so fast? And the best practices is like, for the month, the flavor of the month. We can't keep track of it. And the other good point you brought up that I really like was like, yeah, we're gonna see a lot more supply chain attacks. I think like this horrible one with SolarWinds that happened, and the other ones we've seen earlier in the year with the compromised Node modules and Python modules, etc. So I guess seeing more maybe that on the Docker side of things, more supply chain attacks there on images. Maybe.
I mean, it's always the mainstream that's attacked, right? And if DevOps is getting the mainstream and Node.js and all of those tools are the new mainstream, that's going to be the vector, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's not DevOps anymore. It's DevSecOps now. So.
Oh, are you stirring the can?
Yeah, we need to inject.
It's SecOps. It's